This is the All Aussie Rules Football Podcast. Round one is in the bag, and today we're going to be reviewing all 9 matches. Sit back and enjoy. Welcome on in, everybody, to the All Aussie Rules Football Podcast. This is episode 14 of 2025, and today we have a round one review for you, reviewing all 9 matches from the weekend. We finally got every team playing this weekend after just four teams and 2 matches in opening round. We had 9 and all 18 teams out on the park, so we're going to have some review time for you. As always, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, whether you're on YouTube, on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Don't forget to follow, subscribe, whatever it is on that platform. Like the video, comment on it, let me know how your team went on the weekend. It was an interesting one. There was a lot of interesting games. So let me know how you went, how your team went even, not you personally. Oh, you can let me know that as well if you like. And yeah, let's jump into, I guess, football action. And we'll start with where the game started. And that was on I was about to say Friday night. Thursday night football. We got Thursday night football all year long. And if this wasn't the craziest game of almost the last 3 or 4 years, I don't know what is. It was a cracker. Thursday night. Richmond, who were expected to do nothing this year, v a Carlton MCG. Big crowd. The Blue Baggers came out of the blocks, absolutely flying, ready to go. They were 41 points up in the second quarter. And then they went to sleep. Not exactly, but the scoreboard certainly looks like they went to sleep. Richmond just piled it on from that point. I think they kicked like 12 out of the last 14 goals or something ridiculous to win it. They tied it up at three-quarter time and then just kept going in that last quarter. Key point of this game, I think, was Richmond turned it into a contested game. The first quarter and a bit, it was just very uncontested football. It was marks from Carlton and looking after the ball. And then that turned around, and I think they worked out that they needed to avoid Wiedering. I think he had like 8 intercept marks or something crazy in this match, and most of them were in that first half. Once the Tigers stopped kicking it to him or to his area, it turned into a contested game, and from that point on, it was all Richmond because, yeah, they just managed to force them into mistakes. Perceived pressure was huge. I don't think the pressure was anything crazy from Richmond. It was good, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't anything crazy. But they just, put a lot of pressure on every time Carlton had the ball. And when they didn't have someone there directly pressuring it, the Carlton players still kind of believed that the pressure was there and made some silly mistakes. There was some shocking mistakes from multiple players in that Carlton lineup. And, they ended up costing them. I mean, let's be honest, the main issue Carlton faced on this one was the scoreboard. They kicked 9 goals for 15, whereas Richmond kicked 13-4. So inaccuracy certainly hurt them. They created enough chances, even with all their mistakes. They probably should have still won this game, as you can see on the screen. I did give them a team rating of 47.05, which is slightly above the Richmond rating. You look at some of the stats, and Carlton absolutely dominated them. 65 to 40 inside 50s in favour of Carlton, so plus 25 there. Shots was massively in Carlton's favour, as you'd imagine when they kicked 9 goals for 15. Clearances actually went the way of Richmond, which was a really good positive for them. But possession was massively Carlton's favour, plus 21 contested, plus almost 40 uncontested. Turnover count went the way of Carlton as well, so they didn't even turn it over as much as Richmond. The problem was, just sloppy mistakes, I guess, and allowing Richmond to make use of those, because we talk about the accuracy here, and Richmond did kick 13-4, which is really good, but in all honesty, they probably should have kicked 13 goals for, because I think 6 of their goals were from within 15 metres, so it's when you're getting over the back and getting that close to goal, you're going to kick goals more often than you kick points. It's pretty simple. Tackle count was 76-70 in favour of Richmond, so that's another positive. Really good number that for Richmond. Crazy game, in all honesty. What do we make of it? As I said after the opening round games, and I'll say this about all the games, don't overreact on one match, whether it's opening game or a game in round 10. One bad match or vice versa, one good match is not a trend. You need multiple games at that level to believe that's where you really are. So we'll see what Carlton bounce back with this week. It's not going to be an easy one for them because they come up against Hawthorn at the MCG. So that will be an interesting one for them. Votes and whatnot from this game. I went Jack Ross with 3, Tom De Koning with 2, and Patrick Cripps with 1. Best players, as you can see, they're on the screen if you're not watching the video and you're just listening to the podcast. Best player on the ground went to Tom De Koning, 97.26 rating. Jack Ross, 85.9. Nankervis, Cripps, and Silvani were the next 3. Silvani played backline, but then was swung forward in the last quarter. And in all honesty, nearly won Carlton the game back. He did kick 1 goal. He nearly clunked a couple others, so he looked almost the most likely to get them a goal late. So yeah, there's that. MVP votes for Richmond. Just if you don't know how I do it, the winning team gets 10, 8, 6, 4, and 2 for their top 5 players. 10 obviously for the best, and the losing team gets 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Obviously 5 being to the best player on their team. So for Richmond, it was Ross, Nankervis, Ben Miller, Tom Brown, and the debutant Sam Lawler, who had 18 touches and 2 goals on debut as the number 1 draft pick. Absolutely great start to his career. And meanwhile, Carlton's top 5, I went to Koning, Cripps, Silvani, Wietering, who had an outstanding first half, was less effective in the second half, but still a really good game, and Adam Chera as the 5th best. I think that's about all we have to say about this game, really. If you look at line positions and where the game was won by positions, like Carlton were better backline. Richmond's forward line actually worked really well, which won't surprise you when they kicked 13-4. And the midfields were very evenly contested, in all honesty. It was the middle players, I guess. The middle range players really got Richmond over the line. They didn't carry too many players that didn't perform. They all did their job. I think Trainer on debut as well, their second of 3 debutants in this one, was really good as well as a key defender. He got the job done. He had some important ball wins. So a great game from him. Overall, it was a good game, one that was worth watching for sure, especially as a neutral fan or a Richmond fan. If you're a Carlton fan, maybe not so much. But we see this week before we get too ahead of ourselves with how good or bad Carlton are. For Richmond, it's still going to be a long season. Maybe not as long as we thought it was going to be, but I still can't see them winning too many more games. But if they bring that sort of heat, they're certainly going to put the pressure on teams and at least challenge a little bit. And yeah, they're not going to get blown out of the park by 100 points too often if they play like that. However, they were 41 points down in this game, and if Carlton had a kick straight, they could have lost for sure by quite a decent margin. So it's not all rosy for Richmond, but a great result nonetheless. We'll jump into game number 2 from the weekend, which was Friday night football. Hawthorn Essendon at the MCG in front of a big crowd again. Hawthorn obviously had played round 1. Essendon were meant to have, but ended up their game being called off, so it was their first game of the season. And Hawthorn won it, I won't say convincingly, but reasonably comfortably in the end. 17-9, 1-11. Essendon 12-13-85. So these two teams did meet in round one last year, and the reverse was the result. Essendon won it, and Hawthorn kicked terribly in front of goal and lost. This time I've gone best players. I think Caldwell was clearly the best on ground in this one. 81.2 rated game. Sicily was good. Armon, McDonald and Xavier Dersma round out the top 5. Team ratings, Hawthorn 48.38 and Essendon 46.74. Both teams reasonably happy, I guess. Hawthorn walk away with the 4 points. Bombers were certainly not expected to win this one. Hawthorn, one of the top contenders. They had already come off a win. So things are a little bit against the Bombers in that sense, but they showed up and they did pretty well. They got blown out late in the first quarter, which kind of hurt them a little bit. You look at the inside 50 count, Essendon won it by plus 10, so they certainly were creating opportunities into their forward line. Just an issue that they have previously had is their ability to turn ground position into scores. And it kind of looks like that might be the case again. It was always going to be an issue with losing Stringer as well. It just adds another issue for them in finding goal kickers. Yes, Kako's come in. He'll add something. You'd imagine some of their young forwards would also improve as well. But yeah, we'll see how they go over the next 2 or 3 weeks before we come to a conclusion on that. But it wasn't the best start. And meanwhile, down the other end, Hawthorn had zero issues with that. Hawthorn's forward line in week 1 didn't perform at all really. Like, their small forwards outside of maybe Dylan Moore were okay at best against Sydney, whereas in this one, they all performed. Chol was good, Ginnivan was good, Watson was good, Dylan Moore, of course, always was good. So just a much better performance from their forward line this week, which is where they won this game, I guess, in fact, was how good their forward line was. Whereas the previous week, it was their midfield that dominated the match and also managed to dominate the scoreboard, getting multiple goals through their mid/ruck line. Whereas this week, their midfield wasn't that spectacular. It was the Bombers' midfield that was probably on top most of the day, led by Joe Caldwell. So a little bit of a change in game there. This Hawthorn backline is a good backline, though. So the fact that Essendon's forward line didn't perform in this one is not a disaster, because Hawthorn do probably have, on paper, one of the best backlines in the competition. So we'll see how the Essendon forward line goes this week. They've got Adelaide at the MCG. It's going to be tough. Adelaide played really well on the weekend, so it's going to be a good little, I guess, indicator of how both Essendon and Adelaide are going this year, because Adelaide have high hopes and they played really well on the weekend, so it's going to be an interesting game. Hawthorn, as I just mentioned in the previous game, they're playing Carlton, so if they can start the season 3-0, that would be huge for them. A quick run through votes and whatnot. I've gone Brownlow, Caldwell 3. I think he was clearly best on ground. Carl Armon is second best for me. And the one vote goes to James Sicily, who had a really good game. A talk on pressure. Bombers were really good in this. Plus 20 tackles. They were a heavy tackling team last season, and they look like they've brought that again this year. So, Brang or brought, whichever way it is, they've done that. So, a good start to their year in that regard. MVP voting: Sicily, Amon, McDonald, Moore, Ward for Hawthorn. And for the Bombers, I've gone Caldwell, Dersma. Sam Draper, I thought, was really good. Zach Merritt and Archie Perkins had a good second half after a pretty average first half. Anything else worth noting here? I don't think so. There was a few injuries, I guess. Kyle Langford's out. Some suspensions. There was some concussions. So it was a pretty eventful game. on Friday night, and in the end, it was a good game, but Hawthorn rolled away early in that or late in that first quarter, and kind of just managed to keep the lead around about that. Essendon Kane looked like they were coming back a couple times, but never could really fully challenge on the scoreboard at least, even if there were definitely chunks of this game where they controlled the football. We'll move on to game number 3, and this one was at the Cattery, and boy oh boy, first flogging of the round, not the last. It was a weird weekend. There was a few close games, but there was multiple absolute shellackings. I think 4 in the end, over 50 points. Is weird because we didn't have that many shellackings last year, and we kind of expected this year to be pretty close season, but some teams just have not started well. And here is one of them. Fremantle went to the Cattery and they lose it by 78 points, 23-9-147 to the Dockers, 10-9-69. Story of this game is probably Bailey Smith. First game for the Cats, and he was absolutely outstanding from start to finish. Gave him a rating of 98.0. Max Holmes was really good. Caleb Sarong was the bright shining light for Fremantle, as he usually is. Andrew Brayshaw was okay. Sam De Koning played in the ruck for the Cats and was good. Obviously, the one actual shining light, I guess, for Fremantle was Murphy Reid. He didn't have the greatest game of all time, but he did have a very good third quarter. He kicked 4 goals in like 6 minutes and 5 seconds or something ridiculous. He only had 13 touches for the game, only managed 4 goals for the game, but boy did he light up the game. In that third quarter, which kind of actually gave them a little bit of a sniff, just for a few moments, got them within like 5 or 6 goals, roughly. But then from that point on, it was one-way traffic. Geelong kicked like 10 goals to 1 or something in that last quarter to blow the Dockers out of the water. Some look at the numbers here. It was only plus 12 inside 50s for the Cats, so they were just a lot more efficient going forward. The clearances were pretty level, which is obviously a win for Geelong. Fremantle were the best clearance team in the competition last year. So to end up just -2 to Fremantle is a pretty good result, especially when you consider, I know it's only pre-season games, but Geelong weren't great in the clearance game in either of their pre-season matches, so that's a positive. Uncontested footy went the way of the Dockers, but contested was the way of the Cats. The mark count was very noticeably different in this one. 110 for Geelong, 55 for Fremantle, so Geelong were a lot more measured and controlled in their approach, whereas Fremantle, while going forward, was a lot more haphazard, I guess, and not as controlled as Geelong were. Tackle count was huge by Geelong for a team that had equal amount of disposals as the opposition. They had plus 30 tackles, 89 to 59, including 23 in the forward 50. That's outstanding numbers and just shows what this Geelong team did. They're going to be dangerous. They were my pre-season pick for the premiership this year, and they've started very, very well. They just did everything they needed to in this game. They were good enough in the clearance game. They looked after the ball pretty well. They managed to, look after the ball really well, in fact. Just 55 turnovers. Fremantle had 65. 55 is one of the lower numbers on the range this weekend. Just a really clinical performance, I guess, from Geelong. Their rating of 53.4, I think, is the best we've had this season so far. No errors, no nothing, no notes for Geelong. They were really good. Fremantle back to the drawing board. They go home this week, so that will help them. But we need to see something from them for sure. As I said though, don't write a team off based on one performance. We need to see multiple bad performances before we we're convinced of a team being either bad or good. It's just the way it is. Every team last year had bad games. Like, if you look at certain games in isolation, like last year, you look at Anzac Day game between Brisbane and GWS, you would have said Brisbane are trash. They were absolutely dismantled that day, and they came back, won the premiership. Sydney against Port Adelaide, lost by 119 points. They were atrocious. They went on to play in a grand final. So, every team will have bad games at points. It's about minimising those bad games and not making a trend of it. So we'll see what Freo do this weekend. I think they play Sunday evening. They do against Sydney Swans, who have started 0-2 as well. So both teams are going to go into that with a lot to prove and a lot to play for. So that should be a good one, and one that will be worth tuning into. Votes in this game: Bailey Smith 3, Max Holmes 2, Sam De Koning I gave 1 vote. MVP for Geelong, I went Bailey Smith, Max Holmes, Sam De Koning, Jeremy Cameron and Lawson Humphries. Meanwhile, for the Dockers, I went Caleb Sarong, Brayshaw, Luke Jackson, Matthew Johnson and Jordan Clark. I don't think I have too much else to say about this game other than Geelong just were so much better. Moving on to the next one, it was Sydney-Brisbane at the SCG. It was a cracker, in all honesty. 12-10-82 Sydney, 12-14-86 for the Lions. Unlike last year, Sydney got out of the blocks pretty well here. They kicked the first 4 goals before Brisbane got one back just before quarter time, and then just pegged themselves back slowly, and took the lead in the third quarter. Led by 10 points at 3-quarter time, and then just managed to go goal for goal with Sydney in that last quarter. Sydney did manage a goal with about 4 minutes to go through Isaac Heaney, just to give them a sniff. Got them within 4 points, or 3 points at that point. Then they kicked another behind, which was rushed. That got them to the 4-point margin, and then that's how it finished. So both teams had their chances. I don't think either team was outstanding, but this was Sydney's second match. They should have been primed and ready. Brisbane, they obviously missed their first match, plus had some issues with missed trainings and whatnot. Charlie Cameron was a late out, but overall, a good hard-fought win by Brisbane. As you can see in the team ratings, Sydney did actually rate slightly higher than Brisbane in this one, but not much in it. Josh Dunkley, I think, clearly was best on ground. He was outstanding, 92.2 rated. Dane Zorko was good. Bailey was also good. I think he kicked 4 goals. And then for Sydney, it was their backmen, Rampy and Blakey, their best 2, I think. A look at some of the numbers in this game. Disposal count pretty similar, +7 for Sydney. Inside 50s, +7 for Sydney. So this is the third team. No. Is that all 4 matches? Sorry. No, sorry. 3 out of 4 matches. The team with the most inside 50s has lost the game. The only one that didn't was when Geelong won the inside 50s and absolutely belted Fremantle. So inside 50s does not mean you win games. It's about being efficient once you go in there. Accuracy for both teams was pretty similar, in all honesty. Brisbane, +6 clearances, which was mostly centre clearances, 15-10 in the centre clearance game. Contested footy was the way of Brisbane, uncontested footy the way of Sydney. Sydney had a lot of turnovers, 73. When you compare that to the Geelong game, Geelong had 55, so +18 on that. I know it's a different game in a different city and different pressure levels and whatnot, but just a fair difference there. Brisbane, meanwhile, 67. So won that game, that area of the game, by 6. Outside of that, tackles were pretty good for Sydney. Brisbane were not huge, but also didn't need to be in the end because they won the game. Looking at what else do we have here? Votes. Brownlow wise, I went Dunkley 3, Bailey 2, Nick Blakey 1. MVP, I've gone Dunkley, Zorko, Bailey, McInerney and Wilmot. For Brisbane, and for Sydney, Rampy, Blakey, Campbell, Heaney and Jake Lloyd. Chad Warner was a big disappointment in this one after a really good round one game. He was not very well seen at all throughout this game. His first half was very quiet. He did manage a goal, I think, but overall, not his best performance. And yeah, that's probably a wrap on that game. Brisbane obviously will be stoked. They get the win. They've got a Sunday game up at the Gabba against the Eagles, who were, let's just say, very disappointing this weekend. So Brisbane are looking very much likely to start 2-0, which they'll be stoked with. And then they go up, have another home game, because that will be their rescheduled match against Geelong up at the Gabba. So back-to-back home games. That won't be an easy one, but certainly sets them up for the next little bit if they can go in and get a good solid win against West Coast this week. And as we said, Sydney do not have an easy game here. They're going to be going to Perth to play Fremantle with everything to play for. Then they have their bye in round 3 before round 4. They play North Melbourne in Melbourne. So, while that's probably their easiest one of their season, they won't want to be winless going into that. They won't want to be 0-3, which at the moment it looks quite likely that they might be. They haven't been bad in either game, in all honesty. They only lost this by 4 points. They lost by 20 points to Hawthorn. I think they've been good enough to win both of those games. They've both been kind of toss of the coins, games that are probably like 60% the other team winning, 40% them winning. So things could be very different, in all honesty, for both, for mainly Sydney. But they're not. The realism is they're 0-2. But Brisbane were 0-3 last year. They went on to win a premiership. So write Sydney off at your own peril, because I certainly won't be doing that. Next game, we go to Saturday night football, and this one was a good one. If I can get it up, here we go. We got the Bulldogs versus the Kangaroos. 17-11, 113 for the Doggies. 14-13, 97 for the Kangaroos. Cracking game. Kind of one that Bulldogs pretty much led start to finish. In fact, I think they did. They scored first and just held on from that point. But never got away. They got a couple goals up, and then Kangaroos would kick one. Then they'd kick 3 or 4 in a row, then the Kangaroos would kick a couple. And then they'd kick one, and then the other team would kick one. And it just kind of stayed this way most of the way. Never got outside of above 30 points. Never kind of got within 5 or 6, like in under a kick after half time. So it was just kind of always close, but never quite close enough for the Kangaroos in this one. But nonetheless, a solid enough start for them. Bulldogs obviously carrying quite a few injuries at the moment, especially through their midfield. But no excuses. They got the job done. But yeah, you can only play with who you got. Best players I've given, Bailey Dale was an 84.6, Ed Richards an 80.5. Tristan Xerri was the best for the Kangaroos, 78.7. Matthew Kennedy in his first game for the Kennel, 76.9. And Tom Liberatore as first game as captain, 76.2. Team ratings very close again. Bulldogs slightly above at 46.67, sorry, and North Melbourne at 46.3. So pretty close in that regard. Disposal count went the way of Kangaroos, but the inside 50s were dominated by the Doggies, plus 9. Clearance-wise, Doggies are usually pretty good at this, but I guess the fact no Treloar and no, more importantly, Bontempelli does certainly hurt their clearance game. They still have Libba, but like Bont's their main source of that in terms of structure and experience, I guess. So they lost it by 6, mainly in the centre clearance, or all in the centre clearance game, 17-11 in favour of Kangaroos. So Kangaroos did well at getting their hands on the ball. Turnover count wasn't that high for either team, nor should it be. They were playing under the roof of Marvel Stadium, but 54 to the Kangaroos, 50 to the Bulldogs. So not too much difference between the two teams there. Marks pretty even across the board. Yeah, I don't know. Kangaroos pressured well, 75 tackles to 52 for the Doggies. The Kangaroos are going to be a tough team to beat this year. There's no doubt about it, but I still think they're a little bit away from challenging for the top 8. We're going to learn a lot about both of these teams over the next fortnight or so. Obviously, round 2's coming up this weekend. Bulldogs are hosting Collingwood in their 100-year celebration game. So that should be a cracker. It will certainly be an interesting game to see exactly where Bulldogs are. I mean, we still don't really know where Collingwood are after 2 games, to be fair. Meanwhile, the Kangaroos have Melbourne at Marvel Stadium. So they stay at Marvel. They play against Melbourne, who were quite good in their first game of the season against GWS, which we will be reviewing in a minute or two. So we'll learn a bit more about North, but I think they're going to be a hard team to beat. But I'm not convinced we'll see more than maybe 6 or 7 wins from them this year. But certainly a better team than they were last year. And the previous 3 or 4 years, in all honesty. Brownlow votes, I went Bailey Dale 3, Jai Simpkin 2, and Ed Richards 1. MVP for the Doggies, I went Bailey Dale, Ed Richards, Kennedy, Liberatore, and Latham Vandermeer in the forward line. For the Kangaroos, Tristan Zeri, I think Jai Simpkin has had an outstanding pre-season, and that's transferred into the first game. He was good. Luke Davies-Yanaki, Harry Sheasel, and Bailey Scott rounds out the top 5 for the Roos. Areas to note of this game is mainly, I guess, the forward line of North was really good. That was what made it look like they were in this game, I guess. You've got the new tall combination. They've obviously always had Larky, but adding Jack Darling to that has really helped, I think. Zerha was good in this, so their forward line was quite effective. The Bulldogs' backline was beaten in that regard, but also ran the ball quite well. Bailey Dale was outstanding. So it's kind of a bit of a hit and miss in that regard, I guess, for both teams there. Jumping into the other Saturday night game, and this is the second blowout we've had this weekend, and in the end was the biggest margin of all the games. Collingwood came into this one getting a lot of questions about being too old, too slow, and they certainly put those questions to bed pretty quickly in this one. They won at 21-10, 136 to 6-9-45 in what was an absolute demolition of Port Adelaide. One team came ready to play and the other one didn't. Was that because Collingwood already had a run under their legs? You could debate it till the cows come home. Either way, it doesn't affect what happened because Collingwood absolutely smacked them. Pretty much outside of the first goal, which went the way of Power, after that, it was one-way traffic. That third quarter was a domination, 7 goals to 1. The second half was 12 goals to 2. So it was, one-way traffic. And Port Adelaide just didn't look on the same level in any regard in this match, pretty much. You look at some of the stats. Port Adelaide had the ball enough, just minus 23 in disposals, but inside 50s plus 17 to Collingwood. Absolute domination there. Collingwood kicked straight this week, where last week they kicked poorly. They were efficient in their forward line. Their tools were marking them. Their midfielders and backline were hitting targets. It was just a completely different Collingwood. But the number one difference here was the pressure. Collingwood actually were tackling insanely hard. I think they had 36 or 39 tackles in opening round. This one they had 69. So hit a good number there. And yeah, quite comfortably won it. Contested footy went the way of Collingwood, even though they were tackling harder. Uncontested footy slightly in the way of Collingwood as well. And the turnover count of 79 for the Power is really high. Collingwood's at 66 isn't great. It's even more than they had against GWS. But it was a high-pressure game, this one. And, I mean, when the pressure's on, like even Port Adelaide's pressure factor number was pretty high. It just wasn't quite at the level that Collingwood's was. You look at the team ratings overall, Collingwood 52.61 after doing a 40-point-something last week is a huge difference. Are they really at a 52? Are they really at a 40? Or are they somewhere in between? I guess we'll find out over the coming weeks. Port Adelaide at 39.5 is one of the worst scores we've had this year. It was not a good day for them. Best players here, Connor Rose was outstanding. He had like 36 touches in a losing team. So he was an 80.97. Still side bottom was, in my opinion, Collingwood's best. He was really good, 73.3. Dan McStay was outstanding as a good toll for Collingwood. Good target, multiple goals from him. I think he got 3. Nick Dacos, 71.7. Jack Crisp, 71.0. And Tim Membry was unlucky. He kicked 4 goals, got Collingwood really rolling in that first quarter. I think he had 3 goals in that first quarter. Was really good. As was Dan Houston off the back line. I mean, there weren't too many bad players for Collingwood. It's hard to be bad when you're in a team that's winning by 91 points, let's be fair. Brownlow votes for this one. I went still side bottom 3, Tim Membry 2, and Connor Rose with 1. I think he was in the top 3 players on the ground. It's hard not to give him a vote. He was a one-man band for them at points of this match. MVP-wise for Collingwood, I've gone side bottom McStay, Nick Dacos, Jack Crisp, and Ned Long played a really good game. He was good from the start. For Port Adelaide, Connor Rose, Kane Farrell, Travis Boak, Ollie Wines, and Jason Horne-Francis. Where to for both of these teams? It's going to be an interesting week for them both. Collingwood, as I said just recently, are playing Footscray Western Bulldogs in the 100th anniversary game on Friday night. Should be a cracker. Bulldogs have a pretty good record over Collingwood over recent years. But still no Bont, no Treloar, so it will be an interesting one. Meanwhile, Port Adelaide get to head to Adelaide Oval and host Richmond, which is a game they should certainly win. They're going to go in heavy favourites, but we're going to need to see a lot more than what we saw from them this week. Richmond, while they were great last week, you can't expect them that they're going to have that level of pressure and excitement every week. They're a young team, so there's every chance that this could be exactly what Collingwood did, get flogged week 1 and then go and flog someone else week 2. Don't be surprised if that's what happens here. We'll move into the Sunday games because I think that's pretty much all we've got here. Collingwood just demolished them across the board in all the stats. Sunday, we started with another flogging. This one was Adelaide hosting St Kilda, and Adelaide flogged them 21-9, 135 to 10-12, 72 for St Kilda. Just hang on a second, sorry. That was a massive sneeze. Anyway, Adelaide smoked them. Start to finish, outstanding performance from the Crows here. They put the league on notice. There was a lot of hype about them in the off-season, especially with the Adelaide Crow fans, that they had some high hopes for the Crows this year. And in round 1, they've lived up to that. 7 goals to 2 in the first quarter. It just kind of kept going. They were 60 points up at three-quarter time. Ended up winning it by 63, so not much of a big win in the last quarter, but still solid enough by the Crows. 52.67 rating is huge. 40.67 is very poor for St Kilda. It's looking like it's going to be a long year for St Kilda. At the moment, I could quite easily see them finishing bottom 3. Maybe above Richmond and Richmond and West Coast, and that's it. Can see North Melbourne jumping them here. It's only early. don't get too carried away. I keep telling myself that and keep telling everyone else that, but there's some bad signs for St Kilda early days. Best players in this one, Jack McRae in his first game for St Kilda was outstanding. Clearance machine, played well, got plenty of it, but he didn't have enough support. He was the only player in like the top 8 on the field for St Kilda. He was an 82.2. Isaac Rankin was outstanding, especially early. Saligo was great. Josh Rochelle was good. The tall timbers for Adelaide, Riley Thilthorpe was 5th best. Darcy Fogarty was up there. Jordan Dawson was great. You just look down the list. Adelaide were great in this game. Looking at the stats, it was a domination. Inside 50s weren't too massively one way, but 59 to 52 in favour of Adelaide. Disposal count though, plus 79 for Crows. They just controlled the ball. Pretty much whenever you looked up at the screen, Adelaide had the ball. It's just the way this game went. Only plus 4 clearances, which was all done through centre clearances. 20 to 11, so plus 9 centre clearances for Adelaide. Meanwhile, St Kilda were minus 9. Contested footy went the way of the Crows. Uncontested footy went the way of the Crows. They did turn it over more, but that's because they had so much more of the football than St Kilda had. Tackles was 60 to 52 in favour of the Crows, which is a really bad sign for St Kilda. You don't want to be losing the possession count and also losing the tackle count. It's not a good sign at all. So that's some of the numbers in this one. Brownlow votes, I went Rankin 3, Jordan Dawson 2, Saligo 1. MVP goes Rankin, Saligo, Rochelle, Thilthorpe and Josh Worrell for Adelaide. I don't know why I struggled so much with his name. Jack McRae 5 for St Kilda. Then Nashaya Wangani-Malira, who had a bad start to the game but came into it a bit. Jack Sinclair, Darcy Wilson and Marcus Windhager wraps up the top 5 for the Saints. Forward line was outstanding by Adelaide. Their tools were good. Rankin was good. Ben Keys, everyone for Adelaide was good in that forward line. The midfield was outstanding. Outside of Jack McRae, St Kilda had no answer in the midfield/ruck department for what Adelaide was putting out. Rankin, Saligo and Jordan Dawson are going to cause a lot of headaches for a lot of teams this year. And then you chuck in the back line. Also, Adelaide controlled that area of the game too. So it was just one-way traffic, really. As the scoreboard suggests, it was just one-way traffic. And St Kilda, who I've been pretty public about the fact that I don't enjoy watching them play. Their game style's boring. They don't win enough games either. They're not filling me with much hope, and I'm going to watch them play this weekend, so that shall be interesting. This weekend St Kilda will host Geelong at Marvel Stadium, which obviously it's at Marvel, so it does help them in their cause against Geelong. But from what we saw last weekend, it's potentially not going to be pretty for them. But we don't write them off, not yet. We haven't seen enough from them or Geelong yet to fully be committed on that, but it's not looking good for them. Meanwhile, the Crows is another game I'm going to watch. That's going to be at the MCG against the Dons. In what should be a good game. Adelaide at the moment are going in as favourites on the road in Melbourne at the MCG against Essendon, who I don't think were terrible in in round one. So I think that could be game of the round, in all honesty. If I was to pick game of the round at the moment, that might be it. A couple of weeks ago, I would have said it was definitely going to be the Carlton-Hawthorn game. Collingwood Bulldogs might be a contender. But yeah, I think in actual facts, it's game of the round's probably Essendon and Adelaide. So we'll find out a bit about Adelaide this week. Can they travel? It will be a huge scalp for them if they can go to Melbourne and knock off the Essendon Bombers. And it would be a massive little dagger in the early season heart of the Bombers. So that's the first game of Sunday. We jump into game 2, and this was a cracker. It was wet in Melbourne on Sunday. After a hot Saturday, it was a wet and dreary Sunday, and it went down to the wire. Melbourne 11-8-74, GWS 11-11-77. The Giants start 2-0. The Demons play well, but lose their first game of the season. If you look at team ratings on the screen, I actually rated Melbourne slightly higher than GWS in this one. In a lot of ways, they could have won this, but they didn't. GWS started pretty well. Quarter time looked in a good spot, +5. The game never got more than like 15 or so points margin. I think the highest lead at one point was Melbourne by about 17 or 18 in the third quarter. And they kind of looked like they were in control of the game without being in control of the game. The scoreboard was a couple goals, but they also looked the better team through most of that third quarter. Fourth quarter came along. It went goal for goal early in the quarter, and then it was a bit of a stalemate. GWS missed a few before Toby Green got one halfway through the quarter to get him within a kick. And then the hero, Lockie Keefe, kicks a goal with about a minute to go from 40 metres out to win the game. Put them in front. Melbourne had 60 seconds roughly to try and counter that, and GWS got the clearance, and it kind of just stayed on that back flank half wings area. So that's how it finished. A win for GWS, 2 from 2. Certainly not as convincing as round 1, but a road win in the wet against a solid enough opponent. You got to take it if you're GWS. Best players I gave Max Gawn an 83.9. Lockie Whitfield was good with a 74.1. Toby Green 71.4. Tom Green 68.8. Christian Petracca 67.1. Looking at some of the stats in this one, Melbourne controlled the ball plus 27 disposals. Inside 50s plus 4 to the Demons. Clearance wise, GWS absolutely smacked them. 48-36 in this one, which was all stoppage clearances. 36-24 in stoppage clearances. Contested footy went the way of the Demons, as did uncontested footy. Turnover game was high, but it was wet weather footy, so you kind of expect that. Mark count was Melbourne's favour. Tackle count, GWS favour. Not a massive amount of tackles for either team, considering the wet weather, but still solid enough numbers. That pretty much sums it up. Is this game could have gone either way. In the end, GWS probably controlled most of that last quarter, had plenty of chances, and finally got in front. Melbourne will be ruining letting this one slip. However, they certainly had every opportunity to win it and just didn't. Brownlow votes for this one. Toby Green, I've given 3. Christian Petracca 2. Tom Green 1. MVP for the Giants, Lockie Whitfield, Toby Green. Tom Green, Finn Callaghan 2 weeks in a row has been in the top 5 after being best on last week. Harry Himmelberg was their 5th best. And then for the Demons, I've got Max Gawn, who's started his campaign for, 8 All-Australians quite well. Petracca, Jake Lever, Tom McDonald, and Christian Salem. So that's that game. It was a good one. In all honesty, it was probably the best outside of maybe Thursday night football. It was certainly a good game. So one that was worth watching on a Sunday afternoon. This week, GWS have the bye now, so they get basically 2 weeks off before they have to front up again on the following Saturday night against Hawthorn down in Tassie. So that's going to be a massive game for them. Obviously, they were expecting... they did, sorry. They played, obviously, opening round. So they've played one home game. They then have 2 away games, but obviously the bye in between. That's going to be a cracker, though. Hawthorn GWS in Lonnie on a Saturday night. So that could well be game of the round. They played each other down there last year, actually, and GWS were up by 19 points, I think, at halftime. Hawthorn came back and won it. So it should be a cracker. Meanwhile, for Melbourne, they play Sunday next week against the Kangaroos at Marvel Stadium in a game that it's not a must-win for them, but it's a pretty important match for them. They need to get their season cracking. And yeah, it's probably a pretty good opportunity for that to happen. And then the week after that, they play Gold Coast at the MCG. So a couple big games for them the next 2 weeks. Did we go through everything? Yes, I think so. So we jump into the final game of the round. And this is the reason the podcast didn't come out early on Monday morning. Instead, it's come out late on Monday evening. Because this game didn't start till 6:10 my time, 3:10 local time over in WA. But starting at 6:10 means that the game doesn't finish till 9, which means I can't do a wrap-up until 10:30 by the time I've wrapped up the match, watched it, done all I need to do. And then it's just too late to record before I have to work in the morning. So I have to record Monday night at the moment. Maybe at some point I'll try and get my Sunday night recordings. Next week will be a bit better because I do have Monday off work. But that's beside the point. West Coast got smacked. They hosted Gold Coast, who last year couldn't travel. This is probably the storyline of the week. Sorry, I dropped the ball there. Storyline of the week. Gold Coast can travel. They can travel finally after last year not winning a game on the road until their last attempt, I think it was, which was like round 20-something. This year, they've done it straight up. Granted, it was against West Coast Eagles that looked terrible, but they got a road win. They played West Coast last year over it there and lost, I think, by 15 points. So, what's that tell us? Are they, 15 goal better team than they were last year? Or West Coast 15 goals worse? Or is it a combination of both? I don't know. But it was a good sign for Gold Coast. Their biggest ever win in franchise history by 87 points. And it was a dark, dark start to the West Coast Eagles season. As we've said, we're not writing teams off on one game. But boy, oh boy, was this a bad start to the year for the Eagles. Best players, obviously going to be dominated by Gold Coast Suns here. Matt Rowell, 93.0. Noah Anderson, 87.36. The midfield duo dominated. Chuck in the ruckman of Jared Witts, an 85.4. And Miller, an 81.33. And it was an outstanding midfield performance from the Suns. And that's not even to mention what their forward line and whatnot did. So we'll get to that in a minute. Jack Graham was a 71.2 as the Eagles' best player in this one. As you can see, team rating 52.6 basically for Gold Coast and 35.8 for West Coast. It was one-way traffic from start to finish. Worth noting, King for the Gold Coast Suns kicked 6 goals. Little sneaky note here. I did have him as a sneaky little Coleman suggestion at the start of the year. And he started well. I know it's only one game. But 6 goals from him in this one gets him off to a cracking start. So keep an eye on him this year. He could be one of the best, if not the best, key forward in the competition this season. Look at some of the stats. It was domination. Let's be honest. Plus 72 disposals for the Suns. Plus 33 inside 50s for the Suns. Plus 17 clearances. 8 of those from the centre clearance, 16 to 8. And not plus 9 in stoppage clearances. Contested football plus 43 is an absolute shellacking. Uncontested footy massively dominated. Turnovers 55 to 57 in favour of Gold Coast. So another good win there. They controlled the marks. Marks inside 50, they had 19, which is a really high number to start their season. Tackle count was basically the same, 64 for the Suns, 65 for the Eagles. Just no matter which way you look at this, it's a bad day for the Eagles. after starting the game kind of okay, they kicked 2 of the first 3 goals. From that point on, though, it was just 5 goals to 19. So, what do we make of it for the Eagles? I don't know. In all honesty, I can't tell you. It was not good. Coming up this weekend, Gold Coast have the bye, so they get a really good win there, straight into a bye to start their season. So they don't play again until round 3. Round 3 against Melbourne in Melbourne. So MCG for the Demons. It should be a cracker from what we've seen from both teams so far this year. Coming off the bye, early season bye, will be interesting. Gold Coast are going to have an interesting year, as will Essendon, with that start to the year being disrupted and still having the bye. Obviously, Gold Coast this week, Bombers, I think, the week after. I don't know. It's going to be interesting. How does it play out? We'll soon find out. But, Gold Coast, we won't see again for best part of a week, almost 2 weeks. Meanwhile, West Coast, they have to travel, which is not a good sign for them because they've just got absolutely thrashed at home and now they have to go up to the Gabba to play the reigning premiers who won last week. Not a good sign. If we're to be realistic, Brisbane should win this by 100 points. Will they? I don't know. Probably not, let's be honest. But from what we saw on the weekend, it's very hard to see a world where Eagles are even slightly competitive in this one. So that's Sunday afternoon, the early Sunday afternoon game. Brownlow votes in this one went Matt Rowell 3, Noah Anderson 2. Ben King, for his 6 goals, gets a vote. MVP, Matt Rowell was outstanding. Noah Anderson, Jared Witts, Miller, Ben Long. Meanwhile, for Richmond, it's a bad list, but it's Jack Graham, Tom Cole, Liam Baker in his first game for the Eagles, Matt Flynn, and Ruben Ginbey as their 5th best player. That's the 9 games wrapped up. Let me know what you thought of your team. Did I miss anyone in the best players? Let me know. Make sure you check out my socials as well. We're posting a lot more on them all. Instagram's getting a lot of posts at the moment, so go check that out. TikTok's getting stuff. Twitter, I'm trying to tweet as much as I can. Blue Sky, we're on there as well. So go check them all out at All Aussie Rules everywhere. We're not finished yet, though. We're going to check out how my tips went on the weekend. And there they are. So, after going 0-2 in opening round, we've turned it around here. Well, we actually got the 3rd game wrong as well. So, at one point, we were 0-3. And it was not looking good. And then all of a sudden, we turned it around. We've gone 8 in a row. We got Hawthorn, we got Geelong, we got Brisbane, we got the Bulldogs, we got Collingwood, we got Adelaide, we got GWS, and we got Gold Coast Suns, which put us 8 out of 9 and 8 out of 11 for the season at 72.73%. So definite improvement from where we were, especially after being 0-3. But the long climb back up has started. We're getting better, so we'll see how that goes. Don't forget to comment, don't forget to like, don't forget to follow or subscribe, and don't forget to go check out, especially the YouTube. We're going to be posting plenty of videos there this year. We're going to have another podcast episode this week. We have 2 every week. We have the review episode, which is where you are right now, and we have the preview episode, comes live Thursday morning every week. I'm heading to 4 games of football this weekend, so we'll be reviewing all that before I head off and go check out those games. There'll be plenty of content from those games as well, so make sure you stick around. Share with your friends if you've enjoyed. I appreciate you if you stuck around this long. It's been a long one. It's not going to be the last long one this year, though. We got plenty of content coming your way. It's All Aussie Rules. I'll catch yous on the next one.